What's happening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Park Lane Podcast with myself, Luke, and joined this week by Wes. Wes, how are you doing, mate?
Yeah, not too bad. Just another week of supporting Spurs, I guess, is taking its toll probably on everybody connected to the football club one way or another. But at least we get to talk about it for however long we decide to go on for tonight. So yeah, should be a good one. And yeah, looking forward to
Yeah.
it.
Well, as you say, mate, it's been one of those weeks, isn't it? There's been ups and there's been some downs. Classic week in
Yes.
Tottenham Hotspur. It couldn't have been easy to just have, two nice victories this week. Instead, we had to have, one nice victory in the Europa League, followed by pretty terrible defeat today. And we will get talking about all of those things. So stay tuned throughout the next 50 minutes or so, and we'll be discussing everything, including, some talking points about the international break as well as that's coming up next week. There are rumours that there might be a special show next week. Me and Wes have heard, but who knows if it'll come off? We will see. Right, let's get cracking and talk about today's game. Before we do that, actually, anybody that's new to the show, do not forget to click the like button. Do not forget to subscribe. And if you're listening on any podcast platform, leave us a bloody comment, people. We need to see those comments on the podcast. So if you're on Spotify or somewhere like that, just write a comment, lovely little comment, and we will read you out next week. Let's get into some of the chat. So Jay has said, "Well, not a great result. Think Ange made too many changes. I understand with Van der Ven, we could do without the international break too." Um, Barney is back, and he said, "Evening, guys. Thought I'd join in tonight as it's a relevant game to me. Just got back from Craven Cottage. Interesting, Barney, to see that you've decided to come back when Fulham beat Spurs. Interesting, but no, it is good to have you back." He's also said, "I felt Marco also was good with the substitutions in a positive way for Fulham. They had the right impact, especially Ryan Sessegnon." And we will talk about that, Wes, because today Spurs went down 2-0 defeat to Fulham away. Craven Cottage, kind of, we will talk about all of the talking points for today, but kind of just want to get an overview to begin with of your thoughts on today's match.
Yeah, I think first half, I don't think there was too much in it. I think it was a real sort of cagey, sort of bit scrappy sort of affair, and you felt at half time the game could really go either way. And then second half, we sort of huffed and puffed a little bit, but that was it. And then obviously Fulham get a goal, which was really soft. I think there's enough bodies around the ball to, make sure that doesn't go in. And then yeah, the second goal, like we then try and push again, try and get back into the game. As we do that, I wouldn't say a bit of a sucker punch, but long ball over the top, and it's just really bad defending from someone who is usually quite reliable for me as a defender, in Ben Davis, and you make mistakes, you make individual errors in the Premier League, and you get punished. And I think that was the kind of story of the game today. We've made two individual errors. I think Odebear for the first one, running into a blind alley. Obviously turnover in possession, then Fulham going score, and then the second one, poor defending by Davis. Didn't even get supported by Jed Spence either, which was quite interesting. And yeah, that was sort of it really. So yeah, it's just one of those games where you're just like, oh, really? Like, it's just another one, because I think that second half performance and the way it went has just been a story of our season. When we have lost games, it's near enough been in a similar sort of manner, really. And I think, when Fulham went 1-0 up, it was like, are we really going to get back into the game? Not overly. And I think obviously, Fulham get that second goal to sort of kill the game, and that was that really.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really frustrating one, isn't it? Because it's just, as you say, it's been the kind of tail of our season, and our group chat was absolutely popping at the end of the game with all different types of emotions from people. Dave, who was a big advocate for Ange, is now fully Ange out. I'm still trying to support Ange Postecoglou as much as I can, but days like today doesn't really help, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
when so much was riding on Thursday night, and they go and put in, we'll talk about that towards the end, like a really good, in my opinion, performance, and then it comes to a Sunday game, and we just falter again, like it's a massive mentality issue in my opinion. Like getting these players, these high paid players up for games. Like I just sat and watched the Carabao Cup final, and the
Mm-hmm.
team who was up for it, the team who decided they were going to give it their all, the team who were passionate enough to go and probably not the best footballing side, but the better side ended up winning the game, and it's been the story of us for a long time being Spurs fans. This lack of mentality, and it's not just a manager thing. It's not just the players that are here. It's players before that, players before that. The last time probably saw the right mentality of a football club was times in the Champions League under Mauricio Pochettino. But then it wasn't always like that either. And so
Mm-hmm.
I remember cup final against Chelsea. We barely showed up as well. Under Pochettino. So it's not just him. It's been like it before he was there as well. So that's a real issue at Spurs, and I've talked about it before. Whether that requires someone like a club psychologist, maybe have one, but somebody that comes in, if I was Daniel Levy, I'd be spending money on getting one of these like world class trainers, and motivational trainers in. I would, and bring them all in to try and drill into the players something, and even the staff, because we need to share that mentality. I said to Dave earlier in the chat, and I don't mind sharing this with everyone, that Ange Postecoglou will not get sacked while we're still in the Europa League, right? And
Mm-hmm.
he said, "Oh, when we go out of the Europa League, then he'll be sacked." And I said, that's the exact problem that we have, that you're using the term when. You already know and assume that we're going to lose. Now, it may just be one fan, right? But if that's the way it's circulated around our fan base, that does come onto the pitch as well. And I think it makes um, a huge point to the players. Like if they don't believe it, we're not going to believe it, and no one's going to believe it. So definitely something is wrong. But I really want to get into talking about that shortly. Um, and kind of finding out a little bit more from everybody in the chat as well. So let us know your thoughts on Spurs at the moment. But I wanted to talk about obviously the main talking points, which is that and did make changes from Thursday night. He
Mm-hmm.
brought in Ben Davis, took out Van der Ven, took out Son, brought in Tell. Odegaard was dropped out. Johnson came in. Gray came into the midfield instead of Bergvall. What were your thoughts on Porro was out. Sorry, Spence. There was a few changes anyway. I won't go through them all. But what were
Yeah.
your thoughts, like looking at that and thinking? Because the issue that a lot of our fans have, right, is that we're now going into an international break. Like, why does he need to make changes just before an international break?
Yeah, I think I looked at the team today and I was a little bit like, oh, okay, that's a bit of a strange one. I was excited to see Tell off the left hand side because I think that's probably where he's going to be best suited for us. Especially if we sign him on a permanent, I think that would probably be his long term position. And I mean, full credit to him as well for going over to the fans after the game. I think he showed more cojones, if you like, than a lot of the senior lads and in the so-called leadership group. Just in that moment, than, like I say, those senior lads that want to hide and only want to come out and do things when everything's going well. I think the balance of the midfield was really interesting because you've got Gray, Bentancur, Basuma, who are arguably all similar in terms of positioning. So you'd probably argue that we played with three number sixes today. Having said that, I thought Bentancur did quite well in terms of the way he played. I think he was the one that was supposed to be that more advanced player to sort of join in and support attacks. I think he did that really, really well. The drop off from Basum has been absolutely alarming. Like, it is ridiculous how much he's dropped off. And I think even Ange has come out and said that as well. Really, obviously it's not what we're after. So yeah, it was just one of those where you're going, oh, okay, there's a few changes in there, interesting, but yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, obviously I wasn't really confident coming into this game anyway, Luke, as you know from last week, because I thought we'd have all the eggs in that Europa League basket on Thursday, and I thought Thursday would take a lot out of everybody. But I think we're still in this phase of managing minutes for players, and I think we're in a dangerous cycle now of managing player minutes. Um, and I don't know if and how and when we're going to get out of that rut and that cycle, because it just feels like it's going on and on and on and on at the moment. So yeah, but that was my take on the team setup
Yeah,
today.
so talking
Today.
about what Ange Postecoglou said about Ibasuma, and this is what he said. He said, "I feel for Biss sometimes. I feel Biss sometimes lets the game drift by. He needs to be more
Mm-hmm.
dominant. Today we needed more in that position. I had needed him to play because he hasn't played a lot. At the same time, I needed to perform. It's safe to say maybe Basuma and a few guys lack a bit of confidence, but at this stage of the season, we need people to perform."
Mm-hmm.
He clearly, and he's not one to dig out like players. Ange is renowned for protecting his players.
Mm-hmm.
But clearly he's at a point where he's putting these players in and they're just not performing. Like that team that he's brought in and the players that he's brought in should be good enough to be able to just slot in and play. You know, I don't want to keep talking about Tell, right? And it was great. He went over and said we need more from you or something like that to the fans, didn't he?
It was more
Uh,
like we need to just stick together.
yeah,
But I just like the fact that it. Well, why is it taken a teenager, someone on loan, so he's not even permanently our player, to go over to the fans and just say like, look, we understand you're frustrated and annoyed, but like stick with us. We all need to be together in this moment
yeah.
because it's a difficult moment. Like that should be Son, that should be Madison, that should be Romero, Vicario. These in this leadership group, which I'm struggling to get my head round in modern football, that you have a leadership group. You have your captain, your vice captain. That should be it for me. But yeah,
I worry that
those.
it's all good and well, like Tell doing that and saying, "Oh, like we all need to stick together in this moment." But let's be honest, how much of an impact has he had since he's come to Spurs? Realistically,
Yeah, I know it's been difficult for him because I don't think he's the profile of Matthias Tell as a number 9 is completely different to Dominic Solanke. Yet we're trying to play Tell as if he is Dominic Solanke almost, and it doesn't work. So that's why I was really excited to see him coming off that left hand side
yeah,
today. Something a little bit different, and I think the one real opportunity he had to really go at somebody, he very nearly got success and joy out of it. But there just wasn't enough of that from Tell,
yeah. The
unfortunately.
thing I think that frustrated me was that there was one moment when he picks the ball up kind of towards the left back position. And when the wingers tend to play the ball back to centre backs, it gets played into
Mm.
the midfielder. The midfielder whips out wide. That kind of position of play. But again, it took too long. The ball was stolen. Luckily, it rolled through to Vicario. But my only worry for him is like for a player that doesn't play very much. Obviously, you need to get matches in to get match sharpness, but he just doesn't seem to be getting up to speed yet in the Premier League. And it seems to be 3, 4, 5 games now, and that's my only concern. Um,
But then at the same time, like you you hear players, especially when they go in at City under Pep, it's like, yeah, I need a year to like just get my head around the Premier League because it is completely different. Like the league is different, the way it's played is different, etc., etc. And it's like we're now expecting somebody to come in straight away. He's got to be mustard, else he's shit. Like that's genuinely how we're perceiving players now as they're coming into our football club. Like if they're not hitting the ground running in the first game or so, that's it. They're a complete write off straight away. Like you look at Son's first season, it wasn't great, and then all of a sudden he started to gain. He understood the Premier League, and then was a player that we could rely on time and time again. And I think, unfortunately for him now, his time is done. But there's proof there that if you stick by somebody, a foreign player coming into a new country, everything else, then some can come good eventually. I'm not saying everybody will, and I'm not saying it could be Matthias Tell that may or may not come good, but sometimes you just got to stick with a player, especially a young one, to help them a little bit, and they may come good
I
in the
think as a
end.
lone player, sorry, Callum, we will come to you in a minute because for those that aren't watching, Callum has joined us. But my point is that he's on a 6 month loan. There isn't time for him to like bed into the club, and learn the stuff. He has to come in and make an impact. Otherwise, what's the point? I don't see anything right now, personally. And I know this gets clipped, so everything always gets clipped. And again, it's going to be a week of me slagging off Matthias Tell. But I mean, I don't see anything right now that's going to suggest that by the end of the season, he's going to have made any impact that's going to want me to buy him personally.
Fair
But
enough.
Callum, what are your thoughts on? That's good to tell. Why not? Fuck him.
Yeah, no, it's a difficult one because obviously in the moment that we're in, I think any player that's going to come in, we want to make an instant impact, isn't it? So I mean, Danso out of him and Tell has made the sort of positive impacts, and I would say if you're going to go for someone, you'd probably buy Danso as a player over Tell at the moment. So like you say, though, 6 months isn't a long time, and in the moment we need players to make an immediate impact because so many of our players are below par and not doing their jobs for the badge. That's the thing, and because of the moment we're in, we're purely frustrated, aren't we? So we want stuff to happen. So today, seeing Tell Odebear trying to make an impact didn't really happen. Having Solanke so starved of service as well, Basuma being a complete and utter passenger at best. I mean, Romero looked up for the game, but then obviously got had to manage his minutes as well. So I mean, it's so difficult. And when you do have that, it's no one's going to be happy with it. I mean, like you say, Tell, no way, no one's going to pay the 55, 60 million that people want for that. That's purely buying on potential. And to be honest, I think even Daniel Levy's going to run for the hills for that. I mean, probably just the fee in there was just to make fans a little bit happier, saying, well, look, we could get this great prospect. We've agreed a potential fee in there just to rub someone's ego. But realistically, no player today, apart from maybe Bergval and Gray to a lesser extent, looked a bit interesting in the game. And I honestly don't know. I don't think anyone's positive today, to be honest. We had the high of Alkmaar in the week, but then this is just kind of it's typical Spurs, ain't it? We win one, and then everyone gets deflated within a couple of days of it happening. Especially in a game that pretty much was a dead rubber, to be honest. Anyway, it weren't going to make any difference. We ain't going to go anywhere further up the league. It's just that so many poor performances in there have just amplified it even further, to say the least. And I mean, I thought Son coming on had about good 15 minutes, and that was about it. But everyone else was absolutely diabolical today, and I didn't really see many positives. I think I was messaging the group chat earlier, weren't I, before it all kicked off between Dave and all of his. Dave was ready to set fire to something. I could just tell from it before getting on that plane. But I think I said that even though we had a little bit more of a positive impact, it can only be Spurs. We have such a we tried to turn it around in the second half, and then within about 10 minutes, it all just blows up. And especially as someone like Sessegnon, I mean, Sessegnon looks like a good kid. I think we should go and buy him and all that. I mean, you never know. How much is he worth now? 30 million? I mean, we should go and cough up the money and go and get him, shouldn't we? He's a young, hungry player that we want and all that. But no, it's. Yeah, I mean, it was a good finish, but he really turned freaking Spence and Gray inside out, or Spence and Davis. It was not a positive goal to concede. And to be honest, I think everyone's on a real low at the moment. And I feel for Ange because I think he is trying. And obviously, we saw the logic in today. It was to rest players, to rotate them. But realistically, did we need to rotate? We haven't got another game for 2 weeks. I mean, bollocks to international break if we had the players play for us and all that, because I bet Romero today will say, oh yeah, I had a bit of a tight hamstring. I bet he'll go and play 480, 190 minutes for Argentina in the next 2 games, won't he, as well? And the same with a lot of the other players. But if I see Bentancur and Basuma in midfield again, I'm I would
Yeah,
really
it's a
be
weird one
concerned. Let's put that.
because you mentioned it, didn't you? Where it's like it is weird to play like Gray, Bentancur, and Basuma, and Bentancur ended up being the one played slightly kind of further forward at
Mm.
times, but then he's been asked to play in a deeper role at times when there's been other players on the pitch. So it's like really weird to just like tinker and move players around and say, okay, right, today you can be a bit more roaming. Last week you need to be a bit more holding. Like there really needs to be I know we can't just rely on someone like Bergvall, but he's been putting in such good performances recently. Like, why does he need to be dropped? Like, he's, in my opinion, unless there's something we don't know, like he's not a risk of like an injury. And I get like your point of view as well, Callum. Like, you can't rest people for international duty, but I suppose also like they want to make sure they're ready for the rest of the season. But if that's the case, they should have limited minutes for international duty, and they shouldn't be flying halfway around the world for the next,
Yeah, Madison's not been called up for internationals, so he could have played today. I mean, I would have probably said that would have been at least a little bit more balanced and a little bit more creative because we was devoid of ideas in that first half, and even into the second. When Bergvall came on, I thought he did really well, but the balance of the team today, it was so. Well, you'd think it'd be defensive, but I mean, I didn't see anything from Basuma or Bentancur to suggest that at all. They was just getting in each other's way. They was getting confused. They didn't know what direction to go in. And I mean, when you've got a youngster like Gray trying to learn his trade and understand what he's meant to do in a game like that, I mean, when you've got two clowns next to him, how does that inspire him to go forward? Let's put it that way. It was really, really difficult and. Well, it's like Holly said, she's bored of it now. I think all of us are bored at Spurs at the moment. I mean, I'll try and do a Spurs quiz next weekend, cheer everyone up, but I'm sure.
Going to be my segue to say if you are all bored of Spurs, then tune into our podcast next weekend as Callum's going to be the host of a Spurs quiz. So as it's international duty, why not? But it got confirmed by the big man himself before I got to do it. So there we go. Don't be bored of Spurs. Let's do a quiz. But yeah, you're right. Like I don't think actually, Wes, that we look too bad defensively today. Bar obviously the issues with obviously we conceded 2 goals, but I mean, like I wasn't like worried throughout the game too much defensively. But how mental is it that Archie Gray plays his first, pretty much one of his first games in midfield, and then halfway through the game they're like, "Oh, we'll just take off a centre back and pop you back into play centre back because actually you probably look a little bit more comfortable there due to the minutes that you've had."
Well, that's what I was saying earlier, about managing minutes. I'm getting a bit bored and fed up of it now because everybody should realistically be back up to speed and match sharpness and match fitness. But yeah, it was just a really strange balance to the midfield, and no wonder we looked relatively all right defensively because effectively we had 7 defensive-minded players on the pitch, realistically. So you'd like to think with that amount of players there that we should have been all right and we should have been solid defensively. Although Basuma put the kit on, as I like to say, Brennan Johnson put his kit on again. So. Exactly, that's what I mean, Cal, when I say he should put his kit on and then he's gone out there.
What about that changeover as well at the end of the half where we had fucking Udogie on the right and Spence on the left? What the fuck was that about?
No idea what that was about. I'm not gonna lie.
That stayed for about 5 or 6.
He was worried about. So he wasn't worried about Emile Smith-Rowe on the right with Spence, but what I think was worrying was Iwobi with Udogie. Iwobi seemed to be getting the better of. That's what I saw when I was watching it.
Well, then throw off Udogie at half time and throw on Porro because I mean, realistically, he was probably a lot more. Well, Udogie did fuck all today. I mean, he's looked half the player that he has this season. Even when he has played, I think he's had one good game in about 20. So I mean, so many players are not doing themselves any credit, and if there's a mass fire sale in the summer, I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest. I think there's going to be a lot of fan favourites that could go this summer to balance the books, but also to just go, look, you're not invincible, because realistically it's going to be Ange or the players, and I can see it being both at the moment if we don't do something in the Europa League, because Levy's going to just go, well, why the fuck am I paying this money? We might as well just clear house and start again.
But then at the same time, we've got to have clubs that are going to be willing to take these players off our hands as well. Like if Brennan Johnson was up for sale, I don't see too many clubs going we'll have him based off what he's done in the Spurs shirt. I don't see too many clubs queuing around the block to get him. Same with Basuma.
And yet he's one of our top scorers this year. That's how crap it is. Literally, It's like...
You know what? I think we spoke about it. I don't know if we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, Wes, or if it was me last week, but was mentioning about Brennan Johnson's lack of tracking back. And I'm surprised it hasn't been pulled up more, our fans dislike him, but by Ange himself, because I've noticed it a lot. Like again today, he lost the ball, and he was half pacing, tracking the ball. But what happens is that the player who's got the ball is running away from him, but there's nobody able to then close the gap because they're marking somebody. So what he should be doing is putting pressure on that player, but instead this player gets to run 20, 30 yards of the ball due to his lack of lack of tracking back, and that's the issue that I have with this team at the moment, is that there are certain players who are just like coasting by,
They don't care.
and that
They honestly
yeah,
don't
and that's
care.
the issue. Yeah, and that's the issue that we've got. And I thought with Ange as a manager, like we wouldn't see that happen. Like players like Johnson, but I mean, he did get, to be fair, he did get hooked at half time, didn't he? So maybe that's
Yeah.
why. But I thought maybe he would come out and mention it. But Barney said, obviously from the Fulham side, first half was very flat for both sides with all the changes Ange did at half time. It gave you a little bit more control, but you still lack that cutting edge. I think it's hard on Dominic Solanke, isn't it? Because I wasn't sure in him when we were going to sign him. Since we've had him, I think he's been great. He's offered something really good, but we can't like. He had enough balls pinged into him against AZ Alkmaar. Like he couldn't do it again today. He seems to just like, it's so hard for him to just have balls where it's just pinged at him 24/7 and hope that
He's
he can just like
he's not that type
make
of
something of it.
striker, is he? He's not that type of striker. You can't just ping a ball into him and go for it. It's got to be played to him, and you can see since he's come back, his movement's not all there at the moment. I don't think he's getting in them right positions yet, but he's only had three proper games back. So I mean, I think Solanke's going to come good, and I do think there's a good player in there. But when you're feeding off scraps and crap from our wingers, I mean, Tell. Yeah, he was all right today, but nothing special. Johnson offered nothing. Odebear, when he came on, didn't really do anything. And Son looked good in moments, but when our players aren't creating anything for Solanke, I mean, Solanke's not Kane. He can't create goals for himself, sort of thing, if you get what I mean. And I think we were so fortunate to have that for so many years. And when you have three defensive midfielders, they're not creating nothing for you. You've got Tell and Johnson who are not doing anything, and your wingers or your wing backs aren't doing anything. Literally, I mean, it's like running into dead ends with that, and I don't think that's fair on Solanke to say. I've seen a lot of fans slating him, saying that he's not good enough and everything like that. I think he is. I mean, he's proven that. He did it at Bournemouth, and they got a tune out of him, and I think we can as well. We've just got to have the right players around him, and I think if we build a team around him up front, then we need to get support for him, because I mean the geezer's been overplayed this year. He was coming in to support other players, wasn't he? He was going to be the main man, but then having players like Johnson, like Richarlison, like Son playing. I mean, Son's been out for form. Richarlison can't keep out of an injury room, and Johnson can only score square goals in the way that he does it. And when you take away any stuff, I mean, Kulusevski was having a good partnership with Solanke before he got injured. You've taken away another focal point, and then when you've got Maddison sitting on the bench, he's feeding off scraps. And what can we expect from that? I mean, Ange got the whole team wrong today, and I think that has to lie with Ange. And like Wes said, managing minutes is bollocks now. All of this stuff about people not being fit. Well, they've been training off the pitch for 4 or 5 weeks now to try and get fit. Well, if they're not, then don't put them on the team sheet. I'd rather see Mikey Moore on there, because he scored a cracking goal the other night, and he can't even get on the team sheet. So if you're going to do that, might as well play Solanke, Scarlett, and Moore in a front three and do something like that. Because if our other players ain't going to turn up, at least give these guys a chance for it.
Yeah, fair enough. Wes, do you agree regarding Solanke?
Yeah, I think Solanke was almost. When I've watched him, he's like that player you didn't realise you kind of needed until you had him. But completely agree with Callum. And I don't think it's been something that's happened like the last few weeks. I think it's something that's been happening for a long, long time, where he's just feeding off absolutely nothing. And then because he's not getting any service, I think a lot of people then start to question, well, what does he actually do? He's not really contributing, all of this kind of stuff. I mean, the flick for Odebear's second goal on Thursday was absolutely ridiculous. And I thought he actually had a good game. Obviously, the press from, who was it? Was it Son for Odebear's first goal? And then obviously the awareness to lay it off to Odebear to finish was brilliant. But no, I completely agree with Callum. Like, when as a striker you feed off, you're relying on others to give you something to work with, and at the moment we're not having anybody, and I include James Maddison in this as well, that is wanting to give him the ball early enough to allow him to do something with it.
Yeah, do you know what I think the big issue for us is? Now we will move on to Thursday night in a minute. But the biggest issue is we do not move the ball fast enough. Like,
No.
with this system, the ball has to move and it has to, move fast. Like if the ball's going to be played back to the defender to then be played to the midfielder or however you want it to be, it has to move quickly. But the moment and the other thing is we saw on Thursday night, right? That absolutely brilliant goal, and we'll talk about it in more detail soon. That brilliant goal that we scored for the third all came because the players moved the ball quickly and they did the right thing at the right time. The issue is that today, under pressure, the only way to get out of a press is to be able to play around it. And you can't play around it if you just hold onto the ball because players can move and close down space a lot quicker. So I just don't know why this system that Ange plays, like I think I could go into this team and understand how to play this system quite easily just by watching it. How these players still don't know understand how to move the ball quickly is beyond me, and that's the bit that I don't get. And this is kind of a segue into my next point about where do we all sit with Ange Postecoglou, because whilst I'm still a firm believer that it can work with him. I get that 90% of our fan base probably don't now, but my point still exists where like a lot of these errors are player errors. A lot of these errors that happen are not down to tactics, in my opinion. They're down to player errors. Like let's look at the second goal today, which Ryan Sessegnon scored. Like Spence completely loses his player, completely loses where the ball's going, and then Ben Davies has to try and mop it all up, and he can't, and they score, and so other moments where last weekend where Porro was playing kind of on the right hand side should play the ball either to Son or out wide. I believe that's the two players. I can't remember who was on the right at the time, but he doesn't. He can't even make a 5-yard pass. We lose the ball. He's out of possession. Unbelievable pass to the back post, and Bournemouth score. Like my issue is that a lot of this player errors and yes, there are some issues with the tactics and I get that, but I just don't get how these players cannot still play this system. So kind of want to ask you about that, Wes, but also where do you sit on Ange?
Really, really difficult one. By now, you'd like to think sort of 18 months in, everybody knows their sort of roles, responsibilities, in possession, out of possession, etc. Yet it still feels like we're, in this process of trying to figure it all out, which is really strange and really bizarre. I think the only thing I can say as to why it hasn't clicked is because of all the disruptions we've had this season in particular, and everything else. Obviously, a lot of players out at one time. I think if we had a couple out and then it was like we got them back and then another couple in another part of the pitch was out, it would be less hectic, obviously, but more so than you would then, I think, put it this way, like I say, if we had some players out in fits and starts and we're still on this run and in this rut, then I think there's more questions on Ange at this moment in time. I think he is going to be very lucky for me if he is in charge next season, just because like I look at the way sometimes we set up tactically and it's a bit like, wow, okay, that's quite interesting, because I think I mentioned it on Hotspur Huddle on Wednesday. Obviously, the first Bournemouth goal, we literally just regained the ball, and Porro is off and he's flying, and then it's like, obviously the space is there for Kirkes, which he drives into, but in terms of when to invert a fullback or get them playing inside, you have to have some form of safe possession, which is a multiple amount of passes. You're talking 5-6 passes. Then the fullback should come into the middle of the pitch to create an overload to then help you play through an opposition.
Honestly, though, I see that just as what happened in that first goal for Bournemouth. I see just as a counter attack. I don't see that as Porro, deliberately playing a game like that. There, to me, is a counter attack and a poor play of the ball. So therefore, there would be no set up to cover Porro's position because it's a intuitive counter attack. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, but then I get that, but then take into account the game state and the area of the pitch which it happened. Like, realistically, that shouldn't happen. And if Bournemouth are going to counter, there should be somebody there with a bit of streetwise, bit of shithousery to just hook Kirkes on the halfway line and take a tactical foul. Like, you see the Carabao Cup final today, Newcastle got 3 lads in midfield that would all do it. You got Bruno Guimaraes, Tonali, Joe Linton.
But then to me, that comes down to the players.
But that could also be down to a tactical issue because everybody's so centralised that then to disperse out, you're off a transition where you've just lost the ball. You're covering almost double the amount of distance that you perhaps need to, which is why City in particular, Arsenal have adopted it. Klopp adopted it towards his last season at Liverpool, where there's a reason why now top coaches will set up in a 3-2-5. And Mourinho did this at Tottenham. He set us up in a 3-2-5. It was a different way in which he done it, so he didn't have a fullback coming into the pitch. He would have, I think, unfortunately for him, it was Serge Aurier that was bombing forward, and then the right winger was tucking in a little bit. So it's 5 behind the ball, 5 ahead of the ball, so you don't get caught out in transitions. And I think actually there was a lot of times, especially when Mourinho first came, where we didn't lose many goals by a counter-attack because we had enough there to be able to deal with any counters off of those transitions. Now it's like we defend in a triangle, and it's proven that it doesn't work for us, and we get caught out time and time and time again. And it's almost that thing of insanity is expecting the same, or is expecting the same result by not changing it. So that's where that comes into play. Like, surely, I know one thing I have to praise is obviously we don't look as fragile from set pieces defensively anymore. So we've obviously done some learning from last season, but there has to be some other elements of like, oh, we're leaking a lot of goals off of turnovers and transitions and counter-attacks. What can we do to alleviate that? We need to look at what we are doing personnel-wise, like within ourselves first, and look to defend in a different way to allow that to not happen. And I don't think Ange has done that enough. Like, I'm all for, getting the ball wide, low crosses into the box to allow your centre forward to get on the end of it. I'm all for that. Get your 2v1s in the wider areas. But there also has to be this thing of what if. Like, under Poch, we defended in a box. So it was the 2 centre-backs, 2 holding midfielders. Mourinho, like I say, was the 3-2-5 way when he first came in. Obviously changed it a little bit. He went more to a box because we had full-backs that were going a little bit more beyond. Conte was very much low block, counter-attack style of football, etc. And then Ange has come in and it's like, I mean, my mate calls him the Australian Bielsa, but it's literally just manic football. Like, yes, Klopp for his all like rock and roll, high intensity, high press football, the gegenpressing football, which every football manager player loves. There was still a responsibility like out of possession, and Liverpool were really good out of possession as well. Yet we are suffering big time. So we either need the competent 6, as I mentioned a few weeks ago, in the profile of a Frenkie de Jong, or we need to just change and adapt how we set up, because it's something that's not working, and I think that's going to be on Ange's head and Ange's chopping, because he's the one that's setting the team up tactically in that way. But look, the worrying thing for me is that the bottom 4 are the only clubs that have lost more games than us this year in the Premier League. So obviously that's excluding the cup defeats that we've had, and the way we've gone out of the cups hasn't been great. And it's almost like I feel like Ange is hanging on by a thread. He's hanging on to his job at the moment because we're still in Europe and we're still in the Europa League. But for me, like, is that enough realistically long term for him to keep his job? I don't personally think so.
Even if he wins the Europa League, would you sack him?
Yeah, but so let me put it this way then. Obviously, Ten Hag won the FA Cup with United, right?
Yeah.
He was then sacked in the October.
Yeah.
So it's all, and I think Ange has even come out and said this, like, yeah, I can win a trophy, great, but that doesn't mean a hell of a lot in terms of his job, because, you know, like I say, Ten Hag won 2 trophies at Man United. United's probably most successful manager for a long time, believe it or not, on paper, yet was still out the door not long after. So
what do you do now? If you're Daniel Levy, what do you do now?
There's a part of me that goes sell the club and give it to other people, because I think culturally, I know you mentioned earlier about this whole thing of mentality, etc. Like, I look at, okay, the owners went in at City and they have built the club to win. Abramovich went into Chelsea and built the club to win. And Chelsea are notorious for winning. I know it hasn't gone their way since Bowley and this Blueco group or whatever they're called have come in. Obviously different ownership group. But especially at academy level, Chelsea were notorious for winning, and that's their DNA, winning at all costs. You look at, obviously Newcastle, their owners are going to build a club to win. The only club really where an ownership has gone in and it's the culture around the club that is a winning culture first, realistically, was Liverpool, because they've got the history of winning. So the owners are just coming in and servicing effectively what the culture's already at the club in terms of winning and winning and winning. Obviously United, you can make a case for either or, because they had that culture set there. The Glazers have come in, and then obviously the man that created the culture is gone, and then now they've fallen off a cliff. Whereas I think the culture at Tottenham has always been, it feels like, from I'd say outside perspective, because I'm not in there, at the top table, if you like, but it feels like top 4 is enough. And if we get top 4, that's brilliant and that's fantastic, and that's exactly what we want. That is success for Tottenham, is top 4 every year, as opposed to, like I say, Liverpool is every year they go, we want to win the league. City, win the league, win the Champions League. Chelsea, win. United, win the league. Do you see what I mean? So there's that culture then that breeds through the club of a winning mentality. We don't have that. So we are top 4, brilliant, great. Let's celebrate it like we win a trophy. So I think that's the biggest shift that needs to happen first in order for us to progress forwards. If I'm Daniel Levy right now, I don't think there's much point in changing the manager now. So it's a case of get through the rest of the season in whatever way, shape or form we can. And then I think we need to look elsewhere potentially in the summer. I feel for Ange. I wanted it to work, but I think there's too much going against him at the moment for it to come good eventually. And I'm not using Arteta as an example, but there was moments of hope with Arsenal and Arteta. There was moments of hope. We don't have those moments of hope under Ange. Even if we win the Europa League, it's like, yeah, great, we've won a trophy, but realistically, that's papered over the cracks. I think Arsenal had that with Wenger when he was picking up these FA Cups here and there. Their league form was shocking. They weren't going anywhere in Europe. And it was like, yeah, but we won a trophy, great. But actually, the bigger picture was it papered over a lot of cracks. Wenger then left. Emery got shafted. Arteta picked up a cup with Emery's team. And now it's like I say, there was moments of hope. And I think, like I say, as a club, we don't have that.
It could end up with Ange Postecoglou just like it ended up with Nuno, whereby he's hounded out of this football club. He goes to another club, Premier League club, which I highly think he will. And then, next thing we know it, Nottingham Forest are in Champions League spot and we're sitting 13th in the league. And this could happen all over again. The issue that I have is we just don't give people time. We just don't give people enough time. My issue with this whole Daniel Levy is not like in it to win it, and I get all of those things. Like realistically, and I'm not sticking up for anybody, right? Where have we been and what have we realistically done, bar maybe 30 odd years ago, to warrant the fact that we should be winning everything? We should be challenging for titles. Do you get and I get what you mean, whereby people come in and therefore the culture should be changed where that's what they just expect. And I get that. But I feel like at times we try and ask for things that we don't deserve.
No, I'm with you. And with you in terms of like, it's almost like fan entitlement. Like fans
Yeah,
feel entitled to win something, but notoriously we don't.
yeah,
But then we've been so close, like close to the, and I think this is why fans are asking for, I'd still call him the gaffer, Poch to come back, because yes, he built a great team and he had players in at the right times in terms of age profile, etc., etc. But from a fan point of view, Pochettino gave every single Spurs fan hope that we could do something and we
I get
could
that.
win the biggest prize. Like we're talking the Premier League, the Champions League. Like it was unheard of for Spurs to be even in those conversations. Poch made us getting Champions League football like a trip to do your local food shop every week. Do you know what I mean? That's the big difference, and I think that's potentially why loads of Spurs fans want him back. But we all know if he comes back, he's going to get shafted big time because there's not the support from up above. And I think that's, going to rule its ugly head even more because it's like, okay, we're going through managers and managers and managers and managers. But ultimately, and look at it this way, if people in their ordinary jobs, if they don't do their job properly, they're out the door. And so ultimately, the people at the top have not done their job 100% properly because they've not been successful. And anybody that's not successful in business, it fails. It's a failing business. If you're not successful, effectively you're failing. So you need to then step aside. And I think now is probably the time for the people at the top to step aside. Everything's in place, the infrastructure, so they can go with their heads held high and go, this is what we built in terms of an infrastructure. Yes, we've taken our eye off the ball from the football project side of things, but here's what we want to do going forwards. We can say, yeah, look, we built this fantastic £1 billion house, we built this fantastic training ground, etc., etc. Now we can give it to somebody else who might then want to potentially take the football project in a different direction, and then come in and be like, no, I want this club to be winning. And all of a sudden, then the conversations of winning and winning and winning start coming into the football club and into the football department, and all of a sudden, your recruitment meetings change, the way you deliver, everything changes as soon as you mention the word we are. As soon as you go, we are here to win, everything changes. But if you don't set your stall out to win, what's the point? I feel like Dave.
And I do agree. I do agree. But you still didn't answer my question. What do we do with Ange Postecoglou right now?
I think I said it. If I'm Daniel Levy, look, changing the manager now is not really going to do a lot, right? Because they're still going to work the same shower, right? Let's put it this way. So you perhaps, you give Ange till the end of the season and you kind of go, right, we know the league form is abysmal. We're not happy with that. Okay, we've gone into the quarterfinals and gone out. If we do, that is of the Europa League. We could end up with the Europa League trophy, which would be great. But the thing is, for me, if we do, I think Ange gets the grace, but then of a little bit more time. But then, does he get supported? I'm not saying backed. I'm saying supported. Does he get supported in terms of getting the players out that he doesn't want anymore? Does he get supported in terms of players coming in? That kind of thing. So I just have this fear that if we win the Europa League, we end up exactly like United were in October, or this time last year, say, where they're a bit undecided on whether to get rid of Ten Hag, and then he wins a trophy, so it's like, oh, we better keep him now because we can't really sack him off a high. But then we start the season dreadfully, and then Ange is gone, and then we're scratching our heads going, who's around? I think it's probably, even if Ange does win, I think even for him, save his reputation by leaving on the high, and then he can look for another job elsewhere. We can go in a different direction potentially with another manager. Who that is, I don't know. I mean, everybody's talking about Iraola at the moment. He seems to be flavour of the month. But listen, if I'm Andoni Iraola, I'm staying at Bournemouth because I've got a cracking project on the way, and I'm into that project.
I don't think there's any difference, in my opinion, in terms of, like, I'm not talking about management style, or management, the way that they play. Obviously, there are differences, but I think there's no difference in going for somebody like that, in my opinion, or just sticking with what you've already got. Like, yes, Bournemouth have had a great season. Look at him over the next 3 years and then work out a comparison about where he sits in that time. Don't give me, oh, he's having a good season, so therefore we should go and get that manager. And that's my
But then we've signed players off of good seasons. We've also recruited. Are you telling me that we've not gone for? But then we went for Ange off of what, 2 years at Celtic.
It's not to
right?
do with 2 years at Celtic, is it? It's to do with all of the other years prior to that, where he's won trophies at every football club he's been at, through every level of football that he's been in.
Right, but if I'm Daniel Levy, right, I'm looking at Ange Postecoglou's CV, right, and bearing in mind, I'm Daniel Levy, chairman of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. Do I realistically care that he's won the league in Japan? Probably not. I'm looking at him going like, right, well, yes, you're successful in British football, which is Celtic.
You look at what they've done in previous jobs. Of course you do. Like, the thing is, you don't get a job at the top level with your first job. Like, that's just not what happens, right? You have to go.
Arteta has.
Huh?
Arteta has.
Yeah, but he was an ex-Premier League footballer. Like, that's a different story to, like, for example, Ange Postecoglou. Like, it's different to being, let's say, born into a family that has a successful business and then going into like then another successful business from there and becoming CEO of that business, compared to working, on the shop floor to then own, to then working at the highest level in that business. Like, there's a difference between it. Like, if you come in and say, my dad owns X company, I worked as the managing director of, or whatever it was, we did XYZ numbers this year, and then you go into that interview, of course they're going to potentially give you a shot. But if you're that guy who said, you're going to have to show, I got this achievement at this level, this achievement at this level, I was promoted at this level. You have to show that to work your way up. Like, I think that there's a lot of disrespect in terms of like managers that have won things at lower levels, or what we perceive to be lower levels, and therefore we believe, because again, fan entitlement, in my opinion, that we should be doing better than this person who won a league in Japan.
But then, going off of what you've said, we should be employing somebody like Neil Warnock, because he's the promotion specialist at the EFL, right? He has won numerous promotions out of the EFL. So he's done it at a lower level, in the similar way, if you like, to Ange winning trophies at a lower level than what he's coming into.
Because Neil Warnock has already come and performed and not performed great in the Premier League.
Right, with
he's already
QPR, but with QPR, he got shafted because new owners came in and then they were signing everybody left, right, and centre. He had no money at Cardiff, and they were arguably odds-on favourites to go down from the Championship when he took over. Got them into the Premier League. Palace, all right, he had a half-decent team. I'll give you that one. But out of the 3 clubs he's been at in the Prem, I think he's been shafted. But if you're going off of CVs and coaches' journeys and everything else and what they've won elsewhere, Warnock. You could even argue Steve Bruce.
The only comparison to that is if you were talking about Neil Warnock before he'd ever been given a Premier League position. If you come and say to me, Ange Postecoglou, he's done 5, 6 seasons, whatever it might be, 10 seasons in the Premier League.
Yeah.
He's never done anything. He's never managed above a mid-table or lower club. This is the guy that we should have at Tottenham Hotspur. Of course I'd say no. But I'm saying something completely different. Like, he has worked, this is his first role in the Premier League.
Yeah.
Like, that's completely different to saying some guy, Neil Warnock, who's won a few champions. Do you know what I mean? Like, to me, it's not a direct comparison, because he's already a seasoned Premier League manager.
But then, I personally wouldn't say that Neil is a season. Like, he's had stints in the Premier League, obviously not lasted too long, but he's, like I say, he's more EFL, so he's worked his way at lower level and done bloody well. Like, there's a reason why clubs, especially lower down, call him when they are in the absolute mud, to get them out of trouble. But yeah, I just think I still sometimes wonder what we look like as a team under Ange Postecoglou, 18 months, nearly 2 years into it. And I know he's not going to clear everything out straight away, but I think if you look at, say, like the managers that have gone before him, barring Nuno, there was at least a clear way of this is how we're going to set up, this is how we're going to play, regardless of who's available, who. But I think we're still a little bit like figuring that out under Ange, and I think that's the thing. Like I say, I think this year loads of disruption hasn't helped him in terms of trying to cement all of the habits, etc., because there's been too many players out at any one time. But having said that, I think there's still question marks for me, like on how we're going to play. Like, yes, we started off with the fullbacks playing really high, and now we've stopped doing it, and all of a sudden it's like, well, we probably need to flip back to doing it, but we haven't. And it's I think just getting that balance right is something that we've really struggled with. Like, and I'm just talking like opposition to opposition. So there are certain principles that are non-negotiable, but then I think there are others that you have to look at your opposition and go, for example, we're playing Wolves, who we know we're gonna play with a back three, right? How can we look to exploit them? How can we look to stretch the pitch? Right, that's where we might occupy more bodies in the middle of the pitch. Can we do that in the same way against Wolves like we can against, for example, Arsenal, who are going to dominate the middle?
That's not what's happening.
No, but this is where
I think all speculate, right, that there's no tactics apart from the one tactic that he has. There's nobody.
Listen, I'm sure there's more of it. There is going to be more to it than that. But I think sometimes we don't take into account the opposition that we're playing against and tweak accordingly. And I think that's where fans are getting really frustrated, because they don't feel like we have somebody at the helm that is astute enough to go, oh, well, I know I need to approach the game this way for this particular opponent, because they have X, Y, and Z strengths to help us combat their strengths, but also target their weaknesses. I think that's where potentially Ange has let himself down in his time at Tottenham. And like I say, I want it to work for him, because I think as a person, I think he's somebody that you can really get behind. I think he speaks really well. He's honest. There's no, you're not questioning or querying what he's saying in the media or anything like that. But yeah, I just feel like there's something missing.
Yeah, no, and I get that. The funniest thing, though, to me, and we will move on because we do need to talk quickly Europa League. The funniest thing to me is that every single Spurs fan, no matter who you are, where you are, would do anything to get a trophy, But yet, and I get your points, and we do, I did hear it loud and clear. But if we win the Europa League, still not enough. And that's the worrying thing for me. It's like, as a football club, is it ever going to be enough?
I think like if we go back to that Champions League run to the final, I know we seem to be living off of that at the moment, but it was like the way we done it. Like, we were completely written off from the group stages to the round of 16 to the quarters to the semis to the final. Like, the way that we got there as well was, I don't think is ever going to be probably repeated again. But it feels like, because I know we didn't win it, but the way we got it was like, if we did win it, that would have been like ridiculously special. But I feel like this one now, it's a bit like, if we do get over the line and do win it, it's like I say, papering over cracks, because our league form has been so shocking. And it's like, okay, yeah, we're in the Champions League next season, but actually, are we going to kick on from winning the Europa League? There's a good argument, I think, amongst a lot of fans to go probably not. And I think that's why it's a bit like, okay, like, we seriously have to do something in this Europa League, or it's just another mundane kind of season that we've seen over the last sort of 5-6 years, which is, been really, really frustrating.
No, and that's fair enough. To me, I don't see the point in sacking Ange Postecoglou for the sake of, I just don't know who we would bring in. I don't see them, the club buying anybody out. I don't buy into Areola as the oracle that we need, and the person that we, is going to change the fortunes of this football club. What I foresee, using my crystal ball, is that come at the end of the World Cup 2026, they go back and get Mauricio Pochettino. right? That's my at the end of the World. Once he's managing the World Cup with the USA, I believe Spurs will try and do something in terms of Mauricio Pochettino, because that's what bearing in mind, as long as Daniel Levy and Enoch are still at this football club, which I believe they will be, that's what they will want to do to try and appease fans. The issue is if they go and get another manager now, the likelihood then of that happening is unlikely. I think they stick with Ange Postecoglou, depending on what happens. If we get through to the semi-final, the Europa League, or further, then I can see them holding on to him. But if he goes out, I said it last week. If he went out on Thursday, he was gone. I think the same against Frankfurt. I think if we lose to that in the quarterfinal, I think quarterfinal is not enough. Semi-final, final is still not enough realistically, right? Because we want to win it, but. I can see them forgiving him if we can get, that's a semi-final of a Carabao Cup, semi-final of a Europa League. There are times it was moving forward. Okay, league form isn't, but there are, movements in other areas. So, look, it's not everybody's cup of tea. It is going to be interesting to debate for the rest of the season, but only time will tell. Let's talk about Europa League actually quickly, because we are running over a little bit, so we'll kind of move on with this bit, but. Thursday night was really interesting because we all called for, bit more from everybody. We all called for the players to step up, and even we heard it in, it was weird actually. The build up to the game was weird. It was like it was a final. Do you know what I mean? Like it felt to me like the way the players are talking, the way that Ange was being addressed by the media, it was like it was a final. And fair play to James Maddison at the end. They said to him, how do you feel? And he said, well, it's just another game. Like we're only in the quarterfinals. Like come talk to me when we're in the final. And so that's really important mentality to have. And it was so good to see from the minute one in that game, like how much pressure we put on the opposition, how much it looked, Christian Romero looked like a completely different player in that game. And I absolutely loved him standing over Troy Parrott and just screaming in his face, to be honest. I don't dislike Troy Parrott, but we've played him 3 times now in the Europa League. And any love that I had for him has gone, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it was a good game Thursday. My 2 biggest takeaways from it is that Lucas Bergvall's a generational talent and Wilson Odobert is him. Odobert was just brilliant. And I was chatting to a guy next to me and he was just saying like how much better he is than Brennan Johnson, like in terms of the all-round package. Like Odobert wants to track back, he wants to get involved in build-up play, he's got the movement, to want to either, spin away to then come short or vice versa to get him behind. He can go both ways. There was even times where he was dribbling off his right foot and then the next time he'd just switch it to his left foot and still, not lose any momentum. I think he took his goals really, really well because I think, quite easy, especially the first one to go over the bar. I think we've seen that plenty of times, and the second one to go wide. But yeah, I thought Wilson Odobert was just brilliant, and I was telling every Spurs fan that wanted to listen, thank you, you're welcome, that kind of thing. But yeah, he was brilliant, and again, Lucas Bergvall is the Swedish Luka Modric. I'm gonna throw it out there. He's that good. At 19, he is phenomenal.
Yeah, unbelievable. I do want to talk about the third goal actually, because I think it does suit quite well in terms of the conversations we've just been having regarding the manager. Because to me, the third goal, make of it what you will, is the epitome of how Ange wants us to play football. To me, there was pressure on us at that point. We'd conceded a really sloppy goal. At that point, we were still going to extra time at 2-2 on aggregate, and yet one of the things that kind of he wants to do is just continue to play the way, no matter what is happening, continue to play the way we want you to play. And the way that we built the ball up, it was very similar to that nearly goal against Arsenal. If you remember that last season, but this time actually we ended up scoring. And I just think the build-up play from front to back, the feint from James Maddison to get away, the touch from Dominic Solanke, the overlapping from Jed Spence, I felt like every single player did their bit in terms of that goal. And here's an interesting question: like, what do you make of A, that goal, and B, the fact that this is the way that we should be playing under Ange Postecoglou, and why can't we do it consistently?
Well, this is the thing, because we've shown that we can do it. It then becomes really annoying and frustrating because we don't do it often enough. Like, it's clear that the players can do it, and when they're all in sync, it's brilliant. Unfortunately, some players are on 3G, some are on 4G, some are on 5G is probably the best way I can explain it, in terms of just being on different wavelengths. But no, it was a really, really well worked goal. I think there was near enough every single player involved in that goal as well, which was great. But again, it's like, yeah, brilliant, we can produce that, but we need it all the time. If you're going to play possession-based football, you have to be able to produce moments like that, not in terms of the end result, because that can be a byproduct of how you build, but in terms of the passing through and everything else to then enable you to create a scoring opportunity. We need to do that more consistently, and then that's when it's really annoying when it doesn't happen. So I think obviously Maddison, for me, really creates the goal by the little feint to open the pitch up, but he doesn't do that often enough. And I've been a big critique of James Maddison, because you can always tell when he's up for a game, because he's buzzing about, he's picking the ball up off the back four, he's here, there and everywhere, and when it's a little bit sticky, he goes hiding. I want Maddison to start taking games by the scruff of the neck. I think he's got the capabilities and the ability to do so, but I don't see it often enough from him, and he's at that age now where he really should be able to do that. But no, I think the goal, that third goal Thursday, was absolutely brilliant. And yeah, like I say, I was really happy for my guy Wilson to get on the end of it.
Yeah, 100%. And it's a really interesting point, that like, why can't we do that consistently? And to me, that's why I still have hope that we can do something under Ange Postecoglou, because I believe that, okay, you can talk about players that he's brought in and that haven't worked out, and but that happens. I think you think that this is the type of player you require, but actually they turn out not to be, exactly. But the biggest issue for me is, why can't we do it consistently? I don't see that as a tactical thing personally. Like, why can they consistently not? Because they've shown they can produce it, so it shows that tactically it can work. We do understand how it works, but it's just about doing that consistently. But then, to me, that comes down to players. Personally, whether that's a mentality, whether that's focus, whatever that is, something to do with the players. And so I believe it's an easy excuse, not blaming you, but any fan, easy excuse to sit there and blame the manager. But I also agree he's not completely blameless. Look, only time will tell what happens, under Ange Postecoglou. But we will quickly talk about today's score predictions, because everybody loves score predictions. Of course, there's no score predictions for the next game because international break. Next week, hopefully, we will have a quiz from Callum. He did announce it live on the show, so we'll hound him this week to make sure that gets done. But I went for a 3-1 Spurs win today against Fulham. Obviously, I didn't get any points. The rest of the team all went for Fulham wins. Winnie 4-0 Fulham. Dave 2-1 Fulham. Wes 3-0 Fulham. And Callum 3-1 Fulham. All Fulham fans by the looks of it. But everybody did get 1 point apart from me. So that means that I nearly dropped to the bottom of the league. Dave's on 16, Winnie's on 16, Wes is on 12, I'm on 7, but Callum gets 1 point and he's also on 7. So that means that one more good result for Callum and not for me could show me going to the bottom, the reigning champion going to the bottom of the score predictor table. Obviously, we'll be back next week to discuss Spurs quiz, and we may touch on some international news. But no Spurs for the next couple of weeks, so we'll still be here every Sunday, to talk to you about what we can about Spurs. But I do want to appreciate everybody that was in the chat today, because everyone was on good form. But don't forget to like and subscribe and all that good stuff. But Wes, how can everybody find you if they want to catch up with more tactical information?
Yeah, so Twitter's at Wezo10, unofficial Moussa Dembele fan account, as everybody knows by now. Used to tweet things about the best Belgian that ever graced Premier League shores. Starting to tweet more about Tottenham, which is going to probably get me in trouble at some point. But yeah, find me on Twitter over there. Instagram's at Wezo32. usually at a Spurs home game. So yeah, I think the next one is Southampton at the start of April, so I will be there for that one. So if anybody does recognise me, come and say hello. Kickoff Football Academy or Atco for MK for any football coaching stuff, or my coaching business in Dele Alli, Leah Williamson and Kevin Danso country. So if anybody is there, then please send them our way. Sometimes when she can be bothered, I appear on Holly's show on a Wednesday, the Hotspur Huddle, with Holly and my good friend Nelson, where we speak about different topics, we break things down in a little bit more detail for people, and we have a good laugh as well at the same time whilst doing it. So yeah, catch me over there. But make sure people are liking the videos, commenting, subscribing, sharing it all to friends and family, because obviously we really appreciate it and it does go a long way. So yeah, that is it from me, Luke.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks to everybody that's tuned in. Talking about Dele Alli, to quickly touch on that before we finish. Poor Dele, poor Dele. I know, for those that missed it, comes on 81st or so minute for Como the weekend, 90th minute sent off. So 10 minutes he lasted back playing football, but it's so good to see him back. Obviously, after a couple of games off, I'm sure. Hopefully, he'll be back playing football once again. But yeah, thanks to everyone that's tuned in, and thank you to everybody that follows us on social media as well. We've had a big following on various platforms, so keep following across all social medias. Search Park Lane Podcast or Park Lane Pod on any of your social medias, and you'll find us. Give us a follow. Let us know who you are, and we'll give you a shout out on next week's show. But until then, massive thank you very much to everybody that's tuned in this week. Hopefully, after the international break, we can all come back refreshed, rejuvenated, and go on to try and win this Europa League. But until then, a massive come on, you Spurs!
Come on,